They tell a story about the Chassid of Shmuel Gerari. He was a very, very, very rich man, incredibly wealthy man. And his wealth was rooted in part, or in its foundation, in the fact that as a young man he was a ben Torah, Chassidishe Yid, and the Rebbe Marash told him to go into business. And he took that bracha and he wrote it till the Bolshevik Revolution. He once had a competition with somebody over a certain investment, and he said to him, "There's no way you're going to win, because ich doch dem Rebbe Zagvir. I'm rich because of the Rebbe." He was a very wealthy man, as were his brothers, Reb Nosson Gerari and Reb Mendel Gerari. But he was the richest of the three. He was very close to the Rebbe Rashab. So this Chassid, Shmuel Gerari, was once traveled, and he met non-Chabad Chassidim, Polish Chassidim. And in other Hasidic communities, there was this preoccupation with telling stories of their Rebbe's miracles, supernatural events that the Rebbe's performed. And to be very candid, that's how we are today. But in those days, Chabad Hasidim were not into miracles of the Rebbe, they were into the Torah of the Rebbe. And these two Polish Chassidim, these two Hasidic Jews, were traveling businessmen, and they were discussing, each one was telling the other the greatness of their Rebbe, and Reb Shmuel Gerari shows up, and he was a Lubavitcher, and the two of them turned to him and said, "Well, we're talking about our Rebbes, maybe you have some story to tell of the miracles, the special koiches, the special gifts that God Almighty has given your Rebbe." So he says, "No, I have no such stories, I can't recall any miracle that my Rebbe ever performed." And they said to him, "Come on, a Rebbe, what kind of a Rebbe would that be if you can't perform any miracles?" So Shmuel Gerari says, "Well, it's a different kind of Chassidus, different kind of Rebbe. My Rebbe doesn't perform miracles." But they pressed him until finally he says, I thought of one miracle. He says, "Yeah, what's the miracle?" The miracle is that my Rebbe, I once visited my Rebbe prior to a business trip. And I told the Rebbe I'm planning to go to Western Europe, to Leipzig, which was an international city of commerce, and make investments. And the Rebbe said, "No, don't go to Leipzig, go to Vitebsk." Vitebsk was the capital of the state where Lubavitch was. So Leipzig and Vitebsk would be like Fifth Avenue and Kingston Avenue, kind of, it's not comparable at all. And the Rebbe said, "Go to Vitebsk and make your investments." So I listened to my Rebbe, I went to Vitebsk, I made my investments, and I lost all my money. And the Rebbe says, and so the two people look at him, and he tells me he lost all of his money, and they're expecting to hear the most incredible turn of events that came about from all this great loss, and he's silent. And then they say to him, "Okay, so what happened next?" He said, "Nothing happened next, I lost my money." So they looked at him and said, "So then where's the miracle? There's no miracle here, this is just a bad investment." And he answered, "The miracle is that I remained a chassid. The nes is as ich bin geblieben a chassid. The miracle is that I remained a chassid." Clearly, Reb Shmuel Gerari was not telling them a story that happened, he was telling them a story to make a point. That in his culture, in the Chabad, in the traditional Chabad culture, the relationship between the Chassid and the Rebbe is the greatest miracle. It's not the supernatural events, it's the miracle of the relationship itself. I remember in the middle 80s, maybe a little bit later, maybe Memvav, Memzayin, 86, 87, I don't remember exactly when it was, but I remember there was an occasion where the Rebbe spoke by a Fabrengen on Shabbos, and he clearly was talking to an individual person who had written to the Rebbe, and of course, remember, you're hearing a public discussion that the Rebbe is having about a private conversation, so clearly the Rebbe was being very vague. You couldn't figure out from what he said to whom he was speaking about what he was speaking. But what he did say was that somebody had complained to the Rebbe that you don't see the hand of God in life. You don't see miracles, you don't see hashgacha pratis. So the Rebbe said, I recall this very distinctly, this was a businessman obviously. And the Rebbe said, Zoller nemen ein vach von sein Leben. Let him take 1 week out of his life, any week that he wishes, and examine it carefully and honestly, and see how many times during that week things could have turned in a way that would have led to disaster. And each time the hand of God led him on a path of success and blessing. And the Rebbe said, how could this person say he doesn't see the hand of God? He doesn't have to see the hand of God over the course of years or months. The Rebbe said, take 1 week, 7 days in your life, and look at it honestly, as a businessman who lives in the world of risk and profit, and examine how many times in one single week things could have gone sour and instead they went sweet. And you can see the hand of God in your daily life. In the Yom Yom it's written that a businessman is closer to God than a yeshivel, than a rabbi, than a kollel man. For this reason, he lives in the real world, in the so-called real world. And when you live in that world, you see providence, you see the hand of God in a way that someone involved in Ruchnius directly doesn't see it. But you're not seeing it in the miracle. You're not seeing it in the supernatural event. You're seeing it in your regular life, in your daily life. I recall, there's a sikha from the Rebbe, it should be in Chelik Lamed, I believe, Vayigash, where the Rebbe is talking about Mashiach. And he brings the Rambam's opinion about Mashiach. As you all know, there's a big dispute about whether when Mashiach comes, miracles happen and miracles don't happen. Or more precisely, if when Mashiach comes, the miracles happen right away, or it happens only what's called the later stage, the second Tekufa, as the Rambam holds. And the Rambam brings in Hilchos Malachim, based on the Gemara, of course, Ein b'nei el mazeli meisa Mashiach al shibud malchiyas bilvad. That after Mashiach comes, the world is going to be the same as it is now. Olam kimenhagi noyeg, the world is going to continue governing itself as it does right now, except that the Jewish nation are going to have sovereignty. They'll be independent. They'll be governed only by themselves. So there's going to be no miracles, right? But, on the other hand, there's going to be a world where, Umais ha'olam, that the nations of the world are going to live in peace with Yidden, like he brings the analogy, the allegory of God as the Evim Keveth, and so forth, that the wild animals are metaphors, wild animals in the Navi Yeshaya and Isaiah are metaphors for the nations of the world, for the Rishei Ha'umeis, and the idea that the wolf will lie with the lamb and so forth means that the Jewish people, the nations of the world, are going to live in peace. And of course, they're all going to be all worshipping the same God in the same way, in the same Beis HaMikdash, and so forth and so on. So the Rebbe says, Mashiach comes, nothing changes in terms of nature and supernatural, except that all the nations of the world accept upon themselves the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Neach, the 7 laws of Neach, and follow in the ways of God, and bring karbanos to the Beis HaMikdash, and so forth and so on, all within the parameters of nature. So the Rebbe says in that Sikha, could there be a greater miracle than the idea that all humanity should serve one God as one without a miracle? In other words, the idea that within the parameters of Derech HaTeva, the world as we know it, should evolve, should improve, should become so much better, that all the nations of the world should worship God and no miracle occurs to affect this, to facilitate this, is a greater miracle than any miracle that could possibly be. It's reminiscent of what I discussed with you last week about that the greatest miracle in history is Kifsa Achaz ben Shivim Ze'evim Mishtameres, the one sheep amongst the 70 wolves, and it survived. This is a similar notion. When the world changes so extremely without any miracles, that's greater miracle than any miracle at all. And that's really what Megilas Esther and Purim and the story of Purim reveal. The Rebbe, of course, has the Sikha in Chelik Vav and Likutei Sichos, a very famous Sikha in volume 6 of the Likutei Sichos, where he talks about the fact that in the Megilas Esther the name of God is never mentioned, and that the word Esther means concealment, and that there are no overt miracles, and so forth and so on. And he makes the case that the reason there are no names of God in the book of Esther, because the very book is God. The very story is God. It's not the revelation of God, it's God himself. When the world follows a natural order and you see the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's the miracle of nature itself. That kind of clear exposure of Yesh Balabayas Labir Azu, that this world has a master with no miracles occurring, is in effect a greater miracle than any miracle that could possibly happen. I remember, it's what is it now, probably a decade, they captured the Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein. It was Yitzhak Kislev. I don't know if you remember. They called me this Kislev. And of course, there was a trial, and then they assassinated him. They executed him. But he was captured, Yitzhak Kislev. Yitzhak Kislev, he was caught. And I remember we had a Fabring in a yeshiva at that time, and a very wise mashpia Fabringed about this phenomenon. And what he said was that every once in a while, God removes the veil and allows you to see so plainly that it's God's world. What's the miracle? Saddam Hussein was hiding in a bunker. Someone ratted him out. Someone informed against him, and he got caught. Simple as that. But the timing, the idea that of all days, on Reish Hashanah Chassidus, on your Teskis, and considering the fact that the Rebbe had equated him with everything evil in the world, and they should be captured at this Kislev, it's not a miracle. But at the same time, it's not natural either. It's simply seeing that this world is God's in such a providential, such an obvious, in such a plain way. And that's really the story of Purim. When you read the Purim story, for face value, without reading the Midrash Chazal and the various different deeper dimensions, there's not a single miracle in the entire story. It's a very typical political power play. It's power brokers and power seekers and users and abusers, each trying to get one step up by standing on the back of somebody else, and the chips fell as they fell. It could have easily fallen the other way. Every single detail of the story has happened in the course of history 100 times. And sometimes it happens this way, sometimes it happens this way. The Jewish people happen to be involved. Esther and Malka happen to be a player. But all of these details, each one by themselves, is a completely predictable, recurring historic phenomena. And yet, no one in his right mind would ever say that the book of Esther is not miraculous. Because the totality of it, the sum total, when you add up all of the events and the sequence of them, in the way it happened, and how one thing led to the next, and as the Gemara says, the cure is prearranged before the illness sets in the fact that Vashti was murdered, and Esther took her place, and Esther was exactly where she needed to be, when she needed to be, and so forth. There's not a miracle in one aspect of it, but the totality of it is so clearly the hand of God. And it's not a miracle of the supernatural type. It's the miracle of the world itself removing the veil and showing itself to be God. That's why Purim is so special. I say Purim is so unique, and the story of Esther is so special. And because it's a miracle not where God has to superimpose himself on his world, but nature itself speaks God. If I may use alternative words, and this is again an idea which is so typical, so classic in the Rebbe's writings, that we have a nes shalamayla min hateva, a miracle which is higher than nature. We have a nes hamalubash b'teva, a miracle which is contained within the limitations of nature. And of course, when you learn the Mamari Chassidus about nes, clearly a miracle which is higher than nature is greater than a miracle which is within nature. For the Kabbalists, a nes which is higher than Teva comes from Shem Havaya, from the divine name Yudke Vavke, and a nes Hamalubash B'Teva, a miracle concealed within nature, comes from Shem Shin Dalad Yud Shakai, as opposed to Adnai and Elikim, of course. But there's another way of spinning it. There's another way of looking at it. And the other way of looking at it is that actually a miracle within nature is a greater miracle than a miracle which is higher than nature. And greater than both of those is the miracle of nature itself. When nature itself takes its course and you see the hand of God, that's the greatest of all. And of course the classic example for this, besides for Purim, is L'Makkeh Mesayim B'Vchereim. What happened in Egypt, the Shabbos before the Jewish people left, that because the Jews prepared the Korban Pesach, the firstborn Egyptians rose up against their fathers, and there was a civil war, and they killed many of one another because they didn't want to die, as the firstborn were to die 4 days later. So what's the miracle? There's no miracle. It's Goyim killing Goyim. It's evil people killing evil people. It's the enemies of the Jews killing the enemies of the Jews, all within the framework of nature. But when you step back and you look at it, it was the greatest act of God that could possibly be, without a miracle being. And the same is true of Purim. Purim is very much that way. There's no miracle. And that's what makes the miracle of Purim so extraordinary. And like I said, the Rebbe argues that when the miracle occurs higher than nature, it means that the miracle breaks nature. The idea of a miracle breaking nature is that the natural world and the overt hand of God are in conflict, And when the overt hand of God is superimposed on the natural world, one has to give. It breaks it. When the miracle is happening within nature, it means that there's no conflict, there's harmony. The overt presence of God and the concealed state of the world are in no way contradictory, and you see within the concealed framework of nature the overt hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In a miracle which is concealed within nature, and on a deeper level still, the miracle of nature itself, and that's the Purim story. Now in the Maamar we've been learning, this was explained in a historical context. The historical context is Golus versus Geula, and of course in the previous classes we discussed this at length. And what I explained to you in the beginning of last week's class is that what separates Golus from Geula is not only what's happening here on the ground, but what's happening in the heavens. If you can remember last week, what's going on in the heavens. And in the heavens, in the times of Geula, godliness is revealed, therefore down here the miracle is revealed. And in the heavens, in the time of Golus, godliness is concealed, and therefore down here the godliness is concealed as well. Purim is a miracle in Golus. And as the Maamar explained to us, it actually has a higher source than miracles that occur in the times of the Beis HaMikdash. However, Zoh is asleep, the middle level is asleep, so it comes directly from Chochmah till Malchus, from the highest level to the lowest level. And therefore, as we perceive it, and as we experience it, and as we witness it, you don't see the miracle, because the only way for the godliness to be revealed as an overt miracle is it passes through the Midas of Atzilus, Zoh of Atzilus. This is what we have been learning, and this is what we will continue to learn. Now, our Maamar is going to make many points. This is so many little details. But I just want to say one thing before I begin to read, even though this is not going to be irrelevant immediately, but it will become relevant as we speak this class. In today's piece of Maamar, amongst other things, the Maamar explores three people and their definition and their contribution to the story. Mordechai, Esther, and Haman. Mordechai represents Chochmah, the highest level of godliness. And the idea is that in the Purim story, Chochmah or Mordechai is revealed directly in the lower worlds without passing through the Midas of Atzilus, which is why the godliness is concealed. But on the other hand, it's a much higher level of godliness, which shows itself in the world within the concealment itself. That's number one. And then there's Esther. Esther represents the recipient of Mordechai's blessings. Malchus HaAtzilus, the Jewish people's source. And the Rebbe is going to make a very interesting observation about Esther. And that is that Esther acts unilaterally. That in the Purim story, Esther does not consult Mordechai. To the contrary, if anything, Mordechai is consulting her. Esther decides what the plan of action is going to be. And the Rebbe, of course, observes that logically, Esther is the Mekabelas, she's the recipient. Mordechai is her Mashpia. Should she not consult Mordechai? And instead of consulting Mordechai, she acts unilaterally. She makes the decisions for herself and instructs Mordechai of how to cooperate with her, and it all works out in the end. And the Maamar explores how could it be that a Jew should, so to speak, do something on his own without consulting his source, without consulting the Eibishter, or the godliness of Chochmah, which is the source of Neshamas Yisrael. And of course, the last one is Haman. Haman is a bad guy. He's evil. And he has an idea, has a vision. And a basic part of Haman's idea and Haman's vision is he wants to use Kedusha against itself. He wants to mimic. He wants to copy the model of Kedusha and use it all for the Yom Hazeh. And the entire power play is Mordechai coming from the highest levels to the lowest levels. Esther acting unilaterally to set up Haman. Haman, on the other hand, has his own ideas of what he wishes to achieve, and Esther outsmarts Haman. She deceives him into, as the Maamar will explain, getting too close, and when Haman gets too close, it's overwhelming and it destroys him. This is, in summary, much, or the majority of what we're going to be learning tonight. But before we begin, let's just repeat. The idea is that in the times of Golus there are no miracles, but yet on occasion you see the overt presence of God, and the overt presence of God in Golus, when there's no miracle, is the greatest miracle that could possibly be. And let's begin. Line 127. V'hine, Purim v'yem HaKippurim u'b'chad argu. Purim and Kippur are the very same level. What is the level? Ha'oras Yesei Dabo, the shine of the level of Yesoid, which is one of the lowest aspects, of Chochma, which is the highest Sfira, Benukva, how it's manifest directly in Malchus, bypassing the Midas. Now I want you to know something. This comparison between Purim and Yom Kippur just started, and it is already over. There's no discussion. In one line, Purim and Yom Kippur are the same. That's it. Eskazunter hate. Nazdarovia, as they say in Russian. Enjoy it. That's all he says. Because both Purim and Yom Kippur share this idea at the highest level of godliness, touches the lowest level of godliness with no intermediates, and as a result, on the one hand, the godliness may be more concealed, on the other hand, the godliness is a much higher madreg. But of course, it goes without saying that Purim and Yom Kippur are quite different. Because in the case of Yom Kippur, the higher level of godliness, which is revealed to the lowest level, is actually very revealed, which is why Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year, and is connected to, of course, all of the ones, the holiest person, in the holiest space, the Holy of Holies, of course, on the holiest date, which is Yom Kippurim, all converge. So on Yom Kippur, the godliness is revealed. Purim is a similar mystical process or formula, but in the case of Purim, the godliness is hidden. It's concealed in Teva because it's Zman HaGos. And there's Maamar Chassidishe, by the way. There's a Maamar, I think it's Samach Aleph. Omer Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, I believe, is the name of the Maamar. I'm speaking from memory, which is a terrible thing to do. And there's a similar Maamar, although that second Maamar doesn't focus on this at length. Ateres, Tafresh Ayin Tes Sukkos. The Rebbe makes a similar point. The issue in both of these Maamarim is the juxtaposition of Rachel versus Esther. Rachel is the matriarch and Esther is the matriarch. But Rachel is a matriarch where godliness is more revealed. Esther is the matriarch where godliness is more concealed. And he says that Rachel and Esther is like Yom Kippur and Purim, and he makes the ultimate point that Purim is actually greater than Yom Kippur, because in spite of the incredible concealment, you still see the revelation of godliness. And this is a similar point that's being made here, although it's being done very, very concisely. And the Rebbe finishes the point, that since the godliness of Yom Kippur and Purim are coming directly from the highest level of Chochmah to the lowest level of Malchus, without passing through the Midas, it comes down to the lower worlds as well. And in Yom Kippur, it's a great revelation, and in Purim, it's the concealment of godliness, which shows the hand of God even in the Golos. Conversation over. The corollary between Yom Kippur and Purim is done. And to be sure, the real constant between Yom Kippur and Purim is Torah. Yom Kippur got the second luchas, Shalach Kidvarech. Purim was the reaffirmation of Torah, and so forth. They're both Torah. Moreover, not only are they both Torah, they're both Tshuva Torah. Yom Kippur was also Tshuva, second luchas, don't forget. And Purim is obviously a Torah of Tshuva. But, relatively speaking, the Tshuva of Yom Kippur is relative to Purim, like Avodas HaTzadikim. And Yom Kippur, Purim is therefore much more than Avodas HaTshuva, and therefore it's higher than the Madrega of Yom Kippur. And the Rebbe says, Kihine. It says in Chazal, Kol HaMe'ed, and B'Teilim, Chutz Mi Purim, all the holidays are going to be a bottle besides for Purim. And of course, Kol HaNaviim, B'Teilim, Chutz Mi Megilas Esther. Chanukah and Purim are special because they are miracles of nature itself. What are they going to, when Mashiach comes, what are going to be the holiest days of the year, the happiest days of the year? The answer is Tisha B'Av. It's going to be the biggest Yom Tov. I'm imagining between Shivas and B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, it's going to be a 3-week carnival. Mamish, Mevet Fabrengen. We're not going to say Tachlan for 3 weeks straight. Shivas B'Tammuz is going to be a major party, and Tisha B'Av is going to be even a bigger party. It's going to fall over from Tessin to Yud. We're not going to have any problems with which day to celebrate. We'll celebrate both days. It's going to be the biggest Yom Tovim. You know why? Because it says in Gemara that the moment of maximum love between God and His nation was at the moment of destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Because that was one time when God was the most honest with us. He told us the truth. The truth is, I'm not happy, I'm destroying my house. And there's the greatest love in that honesty. It hurt very painfully. But when that honesty is transformed into an experience of positive love, it's the greatest moment. Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av is going to be a Yom Tov, greater than any other Yom Tov. Because it's not God, so to speak, compromising in His relationship with this world. It's God saying the truth. And when that truth is experienced by us, not as painful and as destructive, but as a positive thing, in other words, when truth and kindness become one and the same thing, it's the greatest day of the year. What about Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot? We'll eat matzahs on Pesach. We'll sit in the sukkah on Sukkot. Cheesecake on Shavuos, that'll depend on what the doctors hold about cholesterol. But, B'Teilim. What's B'Teilim? Chassidus explains, Shraga B'Tira Ma'ahana, the regular presence of God on an ordinary day, in the times of Mashiach, is going to be greater than the revelation of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of Pesach, and of the Achdus and Simcha of Sukkot, and so forth. So we're going to celebrate the holidays, but we're not going to experience the light of the holidays, because the ordinary light of Mashiach is going to be greater than that. In between these two levels, that we're going to have new holidays, and the old holidays are obsolete, you have Chanukah and Purim. Chanukah and Purim exist now, and as a result, they're not as deep, they're not as honest, therefore not as revealing as Tisha B'Av will be when Mashiach comes. But nevertheless, they're also miracles of nature, where you see in the nature of the world itself the presence and the hand of God. And therefore, when Mashiach comes, they remain holidays, because since it's the godliness of nature itself, that's the higher level than the godliness which has to change and break nature itself. So when Mashiach comes, Purim and Chanukah are going to be present. Megilas Esther is going to be present. Other svaros are not going to become nullified. But then it adds one more thing, v'halachas. Now, I looked a little bit in the Maimorim, which are explaining this Maimor. I could not find a satisfactory explanation of the word halachas. I'm going to assume that this means halachas of Torah Sheba'al Peh. That even though the reasons for mitzvahs may change, or the reasons of the mitzvahs may become obsolete, the halachas that we do are going to remain constant. And I'm reminded the Sikha that Rebbe spoke, Tishrei Tafshin Beis, halachas Torah Sheba'al Peh, einam b'telim li'elam, and the Rebbe distinguished halacha from mitzvah. He says Mashiach is going to come, the mitzvah will no longer be, but the halacha will continue. I'm not sure that's the pshat, but I suspect that it is. As the Rebbe will explain momentarily, it means the dry halacha. Mashiach is going to come, what's going to remain is the halacha that says this is kosher and this is treif. Even though you're living in such a godly world, the halacha is going to be relevant. And the Rebbe explains, and this explanation I guess is in part a continuation, but in part it's a new idea. Kine. What do I mean when I say when Mashiach comes, Purim will be around, and halachas are going to be around? Everybody knows the metaphor of a lion. It's a non-kosher animal. While in the supernal holy chariot, not only is a lion one of the faces of the divine chariot, but it's actually chesed, the right side. So it's very ironic. You have four faces in the Merkava: Adam, Aryeh, Nesher, and Sheir. Of the four, the Nesher, the eagle, is treif, and the Aryeh, the lion, is treif. And Chassidus explained that the reason down here they're treif, because in the Merkava they have a higher shadish. And the idea is, since the source of the lion supernally is so lofty, there are no vessels that could properly receive its revelation, only in the level of greatest concealment. Which is an unclean animal, which is a place of klipas. If the energy of the lion and the eagle would be manifest in a kosher animal, which has greater bittul for the Eibishter, there would be too much light and not enough metzias. That would destroy the animal. So the idea is that because it comes from a higher source, it descends to a lower level. Since Purim and Yom Kippur, and specifically Purim, is a shine directly from Chochmei Law till Malchus Mukach Le'eslabish became a Yesenam. It can only show itself in the lowest of places. The Hain who translates that Rebbe this means in Allah is Tameh v'Kasher v'Chulu. It deals with Nigla the Teda and what is unclean and what is fit and so forth. She was Galas that Then on the one hand, it's revealing the highest lights of Chochmei Law, but at the same time, it's Binyan Zeh. In other words, Torah can deal with all kinds of mystical things, and spiritual things, and lofty things. All those things are P'telim. What remains, the Halacha Psuka. The way down here in this world, we say this is kosher and this is treif, because that's taka the lowest level of godliness, but it has the highest source, and when Mashiach comes, it's revealed. V'zehu, and now the Rebbe goes on to explain the idea of Mordechai. He said, Mordechai yotzeh milifnei hamelech. Mordechai came out from before the king. And of course, literally it means the king Achashverosh. Mystically it means God Almighty, who was called Hamelech in the Megillah. And he explains, Mordechai is Chochmei Law. Mordechai is the level of Chochmah. And Yotzeh, he comes out from the king, Bebechinas Malchus, from the level of Malchus, which is the lowest level. Bilavush Malchus, which is a garment of kingship. Haman, Yanim Gashmim, which is physical things. In other words, because we're dealing with Golos, Mordechai is an incredibly high level that reveals himself and shows himself in the lowest of things. And the other idea he brings is because it says in the Pasuk, Vayave Mordechai transgressed. And instead of translating the word Vayave as a transgression, he translated Vayave means he bypassed, he skipped over levels. Which explains in Kabbalah. This means the idea that Mordechai's Shadish is the highest levels and he descends to the lowest place. And of course the two are interdependent. Because Mordechai's Shadish is so high, he's able to fall so low. So Mordechai becomes the Mashpia. He's the model of the Mashpia. That in the story of Yom Kippur, it's the highest revelation, the lowest level where you can experience the godliness of it. And in the story of Purim, it's the revelation of the highest level. And it's manifest in the lowest level where it's concealed. And the Rebbe continues to explain this idea on line 140. And here the Rebbe develops, at least a little bit, the whole concept of the miracle of nature. Godliness is concealed on the one hand, but if you pay attention, you see that this is God. This is the Evchoch. And he brings the Pasuk, it says in the Pasuk, I'm on line 140, we did not see our signs. There are no longer any prophets. There's nobody along with us or with us that can give us clarity about what the situation is. Rabbi, I would like to observe coincidentally, parenthetically. The Rebbe quoted this pasuk hundreds of times over the years. I mean, I myself heard it from the Rebbe many times. He says, and every time that Rebbe quoted the pasuk, he skipped the words Einoid Navi. He quoted the beginning of the pasuk, which means you don't see miracles. Means you don't see the point of everything. But the words Einoid Navi he skipped. You know why? I'm sorry for being so Lubavitch, but because the Navi himself was speaking, and it seems a bit foolish for the Navi to say Einoid Navi. I'm sure the Rebbe would blame it on the Rebbe Deshver, the previous Rebbe, but the Rebbe always skipped those words. Be that as it may, Golos has these three symptoms. You don't see miracles, you don't have a prophet, and you don't understand the point. And the Rebbe explains Shabbos Mana Golos in the times of the exile al as a rule. Even when a miracle happens, it's a miracle within nature itself. And he gives us the example of Purim itself, as in the story of the Megillah with Achashverosh. It was an unbelievable miracle, and at the same time, there was not one aspect of this entire episode that you could see with your eyes. That it exceeds nature. It all happened within the framework of politics and kingly desire that he loved Esther. And therefore it all fell out the way it did. Any person with a half a brain can see so clearly. All of these causes were all inspired by a force which is higher than nature. Although the way it shows itself in this world is not any single supernatural event occurring. In other words, it shows itself through nature, although it's the hand of God, because it's galus. And of course, not to see that as foolish and blind and self-destructive, self-defeating. And yes, to see it is the miracle of Purim. It's the story of Purim and the holiday of Purim and the book of Esther and the celebration of all of the above. And the reason for this is Kishaho, you made upon him in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, as opposed to in times of galus, when the godliness descended from Chochmah through the Midas, and only through the Midas it came to the lower worlds, which means it was Panim. Panim was an intimate facing of godliness and worldliness. There was a revelation of godliness in the lower worlds where you saw the divine, you saw the supernatural, you saw the hand of God because it passed through the Midas. What the Pasuk says, Melech liyamin, Moshe Rabbeinu has God Almighty standing on his right side. And it says in the Mefarshim, it says in Rashi, it's a Pasuk in Yeshaya, I believe, that this means that as whenever Moshe Rabbeinu needed a miracle, God was there to provide it for him. In other words, in addition to all the wonderful things that Moshe Rabbeinu was, and wonderful things Moshe Rabbeinu gave, namely the Torah, there were also the incredible miracles of Moshe Rabbeinu, which were supernatural. But that was only the times of the Beis HaMikdash, when there was the Eslapshus and Midas, and therefore the godliness was revealed. And for the same reason, at that time, Nevi'im were prophets. Now, what is the meaning of a prophet? Superficially, a prophet means someone who comes along and tells you the word of God. Even more superficially, a prophet is somebody who can, quote, perform a miracle, predict the future. No. What is a prophet really? What's the key idea of prophecy? What's the meaningful idea of prophecy? What's the important idea of prophecy? And of course the answer is a visionary. Someone who sees and experiences godliness. The idea of seeing godliness. What the prophet repeats based on that vision is secondary. And that experience of prophecy is godliness revealed. And that's what happens in the times of the Beis HaMikdash. Godliness is revealed. Pirush this means that they're shluchim, midas the kedusha. They're emissaries, representatives of godliness, but as godliness is manifest in the midas. And therefore you see overtly the holiness on this person. It passes through their spoken words, because that's what the word navi means. Not just a visionary and a seer, but beire nivsfasai, one who speaks the words of God. And the reason for this is because the Nevi'im in the times of the Beis HaMikdash were appropriate seats and vessels for the godliness to come from a higher world to a lower world in a revealed way. And he continues and he says, the Nevi'im themselves are only Netzach V'Heid, which is lower levels than Atzilus. But this is also recipients from Midas of Atzilus, which allows for the godliness to be revealed. Pirush, Netzach V'Heid, water, Netzach V'Heid, Trei Palgad, they go for the two sides of the body. Claudius, here it says the two kidneys that give Eitza, that give counsel. Mevasha Zera, which are the basis for the production of Zera, of reproductive seed. And Heichti Am Shachamin Bechinis Yeseit Kiyadua, they determine how the Ashbah should come from Yeseit Malchus. V'hei, when the meat is Netzach V'hei, Dalabar, may go far lower than the actual midas of Chagas. Pirush Ein, Ameatmas Aguf Shei Midas Chagas, the Gevurah, they're not on the same level of the emotions of Chesed and Gevurah. Rak Shluchim, they representatives of Chesed and Gevurah, L'shleich Davim Mipnei, to bring forward godliness from the midas of Atzilus to the lower worlds, V'huyin Nevi'im. And in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, the godliness passed through from Chabad to Chagas, from Chagas to Nehi, and from Nehi to Malchus, which allowed for the ideas of Nevuah and Ruach HaKodesh and all the other wonderful things in a revealed way. In the times of Galus, on the other hand, line 154, when you're missing this middle step of the midas. And as a result, you're getting chayes directly from Chachma to the lowest levels, and it comes down lamata. V'nisher ha'aram, you have no choice but to get godliness directly from Chachma. And since you're missing intermediacy of the midas, the way it comes down to this world has to be within the limitations of nature. Which is the divine name, Elikim Aleph Lamed Hey Yud Mem is 86, which is Gematria Hatev, which is also the numerical equivalent of 86. And on the one hand, this is a time of greater concealment, but on the other hand, it's a time where you're seeing the revelation of godliness of nature itself. So we explained Golus, and at least a little bit we explained Mordechai. Mordechai is Chochmah, and he comes straight to Malchus, and Malchus to the lower worlds. And now we're holding on line 157. And here the Rebbe asks what seems like a very, very strange question. I think the only reason this question is not strange is if you understand the mysticism of the question. And I'm using now my own words. Now that we explained what Mordechai is, let's talk about Esther and analyze her conduct. And a brilliant question emerges. That when Esther acted, she acted unilaterally all by herself, without seeking the counsel of Mordechai, and as in fact happened, she ended up making two feasts. Now you read the Megillah. Mordechai is hysterical. When Yoda Kolash and Nasa, he's aware of everything that's transpired on earth and in heaven, and he puts on sackcloth and ash and he waits by the door of the palace, and Esther communicates to him, or with him through Hasach and so forth. And he beseeches her to go to the king, and Esther lays the plan. And if I'm not wrong, the question that the Maamar asks is, why is Esther making the plan? Shouldn't Esther ask Mordechai to make the plan? And of course, the more important question is the spiritual question. If Mordechai goes on godliness and God, and Esther goes on the Jewish nation as they exist in their source, shouldn't Chochmah dictate to Malchus what the plan should be? And says the Rebbe, it's not what happened. Esther acts alone. The Jew is acting alone. He wants a miracle from God. She wants a miracle from God. She expects a miracle from God. And she schemes and she figures out what it is, Kayachol, that the Eibishter is, so to speak, thinking, and reverses the Golus with the Koiches of the tshuva that we talked about, and so forth and so on, to bring about the miracle that occurs. So the Maamar is asking, how could Esther, who's a makabel, act alone? And the answer is going to be because she has such strong emunah and connection to Hashem, she cannot make a mistake. And the Rebbe explains in line 58 to 8, all of us know Rachel is the basis of the whole. In other words, she runs the whole world. But this goes on Kansas Yisrael, which is Makei Neshamas Yisrael. Ubayla Mordechai, her husband, is the Eibishter, called Mordechai Yesei Dabo. Shalakach Leila Bas, that Chachma has a special connection to Malchus. And you would think that when the feminine aspect, when Malchus of Atzilus wants to govern the Eibishter's world, he should consult Chachma, and yet she acts unilaterally. Why? Because of the concealment. And nevertheless, Botach Bo'leiv Baila, her husband, God Almighty, trusts her. She will certainly not do something undesirably. Esther asks Mordechai to daven for her, but she schemes and plots and plans on all her own. And again, in the Nimshal, this means a Yid in Golus, without consulting the Eibishter. The Eibishter trusts her, trusts me, trusts you, trusts us to figure out what the Eibishter wants, and we should do the initiative entirely on our own. And what does she decide to do? Su'uda Pamayim, to make 2 feasts, with the intent of Achigbias Haman, to bring Haman close. How do you destroy Haman? Well, the simple way to destroy Haman is to hang him from a tree. But Haman is not just a person, he's a force. And the force has to be reckoned with. Any human being who, at least in theory, even in theory, got this close, Rachmana litzlan, to Gzeiras Kloya, is powerful. And Esther knows it. How do you defeat an evil? Let's get power. You don't destroy the evil, you destroy the evil within the evil. When you bring them close enough into Kedusha, the lie is shattered. I've talked this to you many times. What's the difference between a lie and a truth? The difference is that if a person has a truth, or a truth exists, if nobody knows it, it's still true. A lie, on the other hand, since it has no reality, it's a lie. It only exists if people believe it. Klipa is a lie. And when you bring Klipa close enough to Kedusha that it can no longer lie anymore, it becomes the truth. And that's what Esther schemes. But also, and he falls on his own. Ki. Haklipa, those forces that are evil, cannot get life in a source to be nourished. To insist it's independent. In other words, in order for Klipa to get everything it has from God, then to dedicate his life to denial of that, this is impossible. When it's a little bit farther away from Kedusha. Because when Klipa is away from Kedusha, it's close enough to draw, but not so close that it has to submit. However, the closer Klipa gets to Kedusha, misbatal may love, and an event of bittul transpires. Klipa can no longer be in denial. Like wax melts in the presence of fire, the fire is only close enough. So what's Esther's scheme? She brings Haman into the Melech, to the king, and of course the king goes on Melech, the Eibishter himself. She brings Haman into the king, and that's how she brings him down. Because the idea is, if she brings Haman very close, to join him in a feast of the king, which is God, and the queen, which is the Jewish people. The Gemara says, when a king and when a lion and a lioness are engaged. Woe to the individual who tries to get between them. Similarly, when Knes as Yisrael, which is Esther, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is Mordechai, are close, and Haman is situated in between them, he is destroyed. However, when she made the initial feast, she saw that there's too much ego, there's too much negativity. And therefore, Haman is not ready to be affected in a favorable way. She makes additional meal till the presence of God affects Haman, that he can no longer be the Haman that he wanted to be. His denial and his ego and his selfishness or self-centeredness is broken because he sees his dependency upon the Kadosh Baruch. And this is what Esther does. Mordechai gives a keich from higher than Ishtalshus into the lowest worlds, and Esther unilaterally acts on faith to destroy Haman or bringing him close. Ki, we all know, this is the idea of the king coming with Haman to the meal. The king goes on God. Esther is sitting in Golus. How is she mentioning God and Haman in the same sentence? And the answer is, when you and the Yidden go into this Golus. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Shechina, goes with us. V'haisa b'ba Golos, and he finds herself with us in Golos, and because of the presence of the king with Yidden and Golos, Esther is able to bring Haman into proximity with the king and is able to destroy him. The Esther Yakeres Abayis B'Kedusha. Esther represents the foundation of the home in Kedusha Al Pi Pasha, and therefore she's able to invite Haman into the home and to bring him down. Ubeklipes Nema, regarding Klipes, it's written. This is a lashon pasuk which we know from the Valam Al Shinim Al Tehi Sikva. What does that mean, that Klipes Al Tehi Sikva? The word tikva means a hope, but he translates tikva as two words: take vav. Tikva nartik, a sheath or a holder, levavke, to the two letters of the divine name vavke. Now, what would be the logic of tikva? Klipa wants tikva, to hold on to vavke and separate it from yutke. Because as long as klipa can be a little further away from the Eibishter, it can nourish, leach from kedusha. When you join the vavke with yutke together, the revelation becomes so potent that it destroys them. Lahafrid mi yutke, to separate from the divine name yutke, which allows for vavke to be in a goal situation. V'yikarav as Haman kol kach, being Haman so close, such in his battle mail, if he's destroyed. V'nasat tzirif avaya, and the two letters of Yutke, and two letters of Vavke, joy. In other words, the greater godliness is revealed in the lower world. And the klipa is destroyed. V'eis eitalo ala eitz, and Haman himself was hung on the tree. Ki Haman he pilpur hu agaydol. Haman, part of his scheming was to imitate Kedusha. And of course, he thinks he's outsmarting Esther, and Esther's really outsmarting him. But there's many aspects to Haman's scheme. And of course, one of the basic ones was the building a gallows 50 amas tall, which Chassidishe explains all could be Kabbalah. But in addition, there's also the idea that he threw a lottery, and it says in the pasuk of Haman, the lottery is thrown in the presence of Haman. In other words, Shepi Lulafan, the lottery was thrown before him. Rather than he himself. What's the concept here? That Haman himself is higher than the Geidel, and he's affecting the Geidel. Shakli Parais Lidam is the Kedusha. Klipa wishes to be like Kedusha Kekev, and the other like a monkey next to a person. Everybody understands between a monkey and a person. Klipa would love to imitate Kedusha, at least to be like a monkey. And this is what Haman is attempting to do. We understand the idea of a Geidel in the Beis HaMikdash. Shama Pelagayel, the one who throws the lottery. Now you have to remember, this is what Purim and Yom Kippur have in common. What's the heart of the Yom Kippur day? Of course, there's the going into the Holy of Holies with the blood and the incense. But one of the events which lies at the heart of Yom Kippur is Lokach Hakayin Shnei Hasi'ikerolis, that he had a lottery. He had two sheep that were identical, B'koimo, B'mara, U'B'domim, and he put on one of them a gold plate that said La'avaya, the other one a gold plate that said La Zazel, and that's what they did. Whichever one the Geidel fell on. Now, what's the big deal? Why do you have to pick a Geidel? And of course, the idea is that we're leaving it to destiny. We're leaving it to chance. And by leaving it to destiny and chance, we're bringing into the Geidel a koyach of Geidel, which is higher than Ishtalshlos, to get Yidden a good yor. The concept of a lottery in the Beis HaMikdash is Shama, Pala Geidel, one throws a lottery. So, okay, Dem Shi, Pala Geidel, for the Geidel has been thrown. Any day he does not know yet. Hey, Yechip, how it's going to fall. Lazet to this side, Lazet to this side. Umaskim, line 180 now, died. He agrees that whatever is going to come out in the Geidel, that's what's going to be alasar for one goat. Shu lazos, or it should be lazos, vim yipel. And if on the very same goat will fall instead. All of Hageda lavaye, for God, yechatas lashem is going to be chatas to the Eibishter. Shesham, because over there on the level of Geidel, Lifnei Avaya, Ein Avenus Mavdim, sins don't separate, as Dinas Nasas Gezochias, sins become like merits. V'lachein, Geidel is Lifnei Avaya Dafka, which is why the Geidel is to the level which is called higher than Shem Avaya, and it's done in the Beis HaMikdash, Ki Madrege Zugaveh, it's a very, very high level. In other words, when you make something subject to random and chance, on the one hand, it's meaningless. On the other hand, it's the hand of God on a level which is higher than reason. And that's the concept of a Geidel. Lifnei Avaya on Yom Kippur. And Haman wants to do the same thing, Lifnei Haman. Haman, Haman, who's the source of Esav, which is interesting. You would think that Esav is the source of Haman. Like to raise itself up like an eagle, which means an artificial inflation of self. Begas is the ruach v'isnasel with an arrogance and a conceit. Ledam is the kedusha compare himself to holiness. Ulahapil gedel lifnei Haman and throw the gedel in the presence of Haman. In other words, as if Haman were higher than the gedel, and he is giving the power and the bracha. That the gedel should work out in his favor. Lachain, and for a similar reason, just as Haman wants to imitate kedusha by throwing the gedel in front of himself. Additionally, also aids nun amma the tumah. He makes a gallows of 50 amas of tumah, the klipa, the bria, which is neged nun amma the mordechai the kedusha, which is the opposite of the 50 amas of mordechai of kedusha, which is the nun sharei bina, the 50 gates of understanding. And Haman makes a gallows this tall, in the hope of reaching, in effect, higher than say the Ishtalshalos, and on that level will be able to destroy Mordechai. Veratza litleis es Mordechai, he hoped to hang Mordechai. Velika chayes Mordechai de kedusha, and to take all of the vitality of Mordechai from holiness, bebeis Haman to bring it into his own home. And he was hoping to do all of this without getting too close to the Eibishter. We wouldn't have to admit his dependency upon the Eibishter. But that's not the way it worked out. Haman schemed. Haman tried to set himself up as if he's like God who has Gödel thrown in front of him. He's subjecting himself to something which is higher than reason, to have an outcome higher than reason in destroying of the Jewish nation. He makes a gallows 50 cubits high to reach higher than Ishtalshel, with which to destroy Mordechai. Oksiv the Torah tells us, Asher sholat ha'adam ba'adam. God gives mastery of an evil man over a good man. The man called Haman, the man called Mordechai. And it looks on the surface that this is the empowering of Klippa, and later on it turned out Lara to destroy the first Adam, to destroy Klippa. Hashem gives the impression that Haman is so powerful, and Haman seems to be at the verge of destroying the Jewish nation. But then it all works out against the wishes of Haman. That Chayil Bola, that the energy of Kedusha which he has swallowed, he has to give back. And Adam Belial, a man, Belial is called the Chazal Belial, without God. Reitzalachta, if Yonike Kedusha, is hoping to grab and be nourished from Kedusha. And what happens in the end of it, Napechu, it's all transformed. Shebeis Haman nitna l'Mordechai Dafka, the home of Haman is given to Mordechai, which is the idea, of course, of his Hapcha. And this is how the Purim story all ends. So in this shtickle Maamar that we learned tonight, we explained basically the nature of the miracles of Purim, that they were concealed within nature, or the miracle of nature itself. And we also briefly explained the three personalities and their roles. Mordechai represents godliness, from higher than Ishtalshalos to the lower than Ishtalshalos, to bring the hand of God into the world, at least in a concealed way. Esther represents the Jew who on her own acts and trusts that the Eibishter will support the choices that she makes and the miracle will happen, and that's in fact what unfolds. And Haman tries to imitate Kedusha, and for a while it looks like he's going to succeed, and in the end, all of Haman's efforts work against Haman, and it brings down his own self, his own destruction. And of course, when you learn a Maamar about Purim, you have to remember what the Maamar means to us. And the Maamar means many, many things to us, but one of the most basic messages of the story is the idea of Amun and the Meibishter. That although the world seems to be a natural world, and as the Maamar says, Eini Tani De Admo, it's saying later, Inu, a Jew with Amunah alone finds God within this world, and that makes himself a vessel for the greatest miracles of godliness to show itself in the world.